Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to episode 4 of the Junior Unplugged podcast. It has been a minute. Holy smokes. It's been nearly 6 months since we last recorded the last episode. But I want to get back in the swing of things. I want to record more podcast episodes. I just want to, have something a bit less structured, less edited, and just sort of more raw. Talking like I would talk to a friend. So we're back. Back on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, wherever you listen to your podcast. Hopefully you guys enjoy this episode. And since we're coming back to things and so on and so forth, I think we should go back to our roots a bit. So if you guys, for the OGs to the podcast, you'd remember that the first episode talked about the whole Mbappe situation, how he's leaving PSG, how I felt about it, what I think would go on, etc., so on and so forth. And I feel like we should come back to our good old friend Mbappe. Let's check in on him. Do a healthy checkup. I think it's always good to, check up on a couple friends, make sure they're doing okay. And unfortunately, let's just say that for our good friend Mbappe, there's been better times. There's been better times. I think it's fair to say that he's not been the transition to Real Madrid hasn't been as smooth as perhaps most people would have expected. And quite honestly, that's almost like the least of his problems. And so in this episode, I want to just talk about the transition to Real Madrid, how he's adapted, everything going on there, the French national team, the issues that have been happening there, as well as the current legal cases that he's got against him, both the one with PSG in wages and also more, controversially, the one that he had in Stockholm and so on and so forth. So when we do get to that section, it's going to be a little bit more, not like NSFW, but a lot more like viewer discretion is advised. I'll say that. But alas, let's start off with sort of a bit of a recap of everything that's happened to Mbappe. So obviously last year, or really basically for the last couple of years, there's always been rumors of Mbappe when he was at PSG, wanting to leave the Parisian club. He'd made a formal demand to leave the club in 2021, the season before Messi got there. After that season, he had a year left on his contract, decided to extend at PSG, despite everybody basically in the footballing world thinking that he'd go to Real Madrid for 2 years, 2 years plus an option. There was a whole pandemic, and in this last year that he didn't want to extend his contract. There was issues with PSG. He wasn't training with the team in preseason, and eventually came back into it. Yada yada yada. By the midpoint of the season, he made it formally known to the higher ups at the club. So Nasser, the president, Luis Campos, and Luis Enrique, that he was not going to extend at the club. And that's basically when most of the world knew about it. And then obviously made it the formal, departure letter, so on and so forth, at the end of after PSG had been knocked out of the Champions League. And obviously then the speculations came, and we're pretty clear that there's only really one real destination that he's going to go to, his boyhood club, Real Madrid, the only club that was really not the club that was only interested in him, but the only feasible club that could realistically get him. There were obviously at times rumors that he could have gone to Liverpool. I mean, guys, even though he's said it himself that he's a Liverpool supporter, he likes the club, I don't think realistically speaking, Liverpool have the financial means of getting Mbappe. And also for Mbappe, I wouldn't have seen him go from PSG to Liverpool. I think the only way he could go to a certain degree is sort of up and go to the best, especially given the player of his stature. But anyway, so he went to Real Madrid. It was announced literally during the Euros. I'm not sure if this was before or after France's first game, but it was announced right as during the Euros itself. Things obviously Mbappe didn't have the greatest of Euros, so on and so forth, but we chalked it up to, he's tired, this and the other, blah, blah, blah. And people were excited to see, what this new era of Real Madrid, this new Kylian Mbappe finally away from France in terms of club football, what would he do? I remember, obviously his inauguration, when his welcoming speech and so on and so forth, packed out Bernabeu, a new Bernabeu. You had all those legends were there, the Ballon d'Ors. It was a great ceremony. I remember people, awing and so on and so forth. The fact that he was speaking Spanish so perfectly, this, that, and the other. And you know, it seemed like he was going to be an absolute hit right off the gun. And then eventually when, you know, he went to go meet with his teammates, so on and so forth, speaking with them, you know, in Spanish, you know, you're seeing when he went to go meet Pintus, their trainer, and so on and so forth. They were talking about how like Pintus, you know, took Ronaldo from, you know, an okay athlete to like this beast hunk of a machine, and he'd be doing the same with Mbappe, yada, yada, yada. And so like, hey, listen, even though I'm not a Madrid supporter, you know, I want Mbappe to do well. All right, as a Frenchman, I don't necessarily want Real Madrid to do well, but you know, hey, a good Mbappe is a happy me. All right, and so I basically, if you want, I drank the Kool-Aid. I thought that things would start off well, and to a certain degree, like they did in their first game. They played Atalanta in the UEFA in the Super Cup, and I thought he played quite well. Got obviously his first goal in his first game. That's always a great thing for a first striker, especially a player of his caliber, to sort of calm the nerves early on, not, you know, have to think of, you know, the, you know, things like 007, this and the other, but, you know, started off strong, etc., so on and so forth. However, then things sort of, I guess, stagnated or didn't continue on really from there. And obviously Mbappe, there was always going to be high expectations on him going to Real Madrid. I mean, as I said before, like it was not the first time. This was not the first time that he'd been linked to Real Madrid. If you want to say, it's been an ongoing story basically ever since 2017. If anything, you could even argue beforehand, because when he was younger, I think like in 2012, he went sort of on a tour to Real Madrid and like played a couple games with their academy and everything. So you could even go as far back and chuck it back in like 2012, they've been interested in the player to a certain degree. Then obviously his time at Monaco in 2017, when he decided to go to PSG instead of go to Real Madrid, that was another time. There was 2021, obviously as explained before, before Messi got there, and then 2022, the year after, where he decided to continue at PSG. So this is like, we're talking about like 3-4 times where he's, if you want to be mean about it, snubbed Real Madrid. And so now coming here, there's high expectations on him. And not only that, but I think this time round, the dynamic of how he was coming was different. Even though in 2022, that was, you know, the Cinderella, I wouldn't say Cinderella, but the massive achievement of what was, you know, Benzema carrying and helping Real Madrid go and win the Champions League final. I still feel like if Mbappe had gone to Real Madrid then, even though it would have been like, they don't need him or to complete or anything, because obviously they won, you know, the league, and they also won the Champions League without him. But Mbappe was at the peak of his powers. It's like you're bringing in another superstar, only anything can go well. Whereas this time around, not only did they were like, well, we've done it without you, Mbappe, beforehand, but it was also, and one thing that I've continuously said is that Mbappe this time around going to Real Madrid, he needed Madrid more than Madrid needed him. In the sense that by that point, Real Madrid has done everything. Last season, even though they didn't have, you know, a traditional number 9, so to speak, they cruised their way through La Liga for the most part, and then went through and won their 15th Champions League, all without Kylian Mbappe. And so this time bringing him on here, not to mention the fact that people still had it pretty fresh in their memories that only 2 years prior, he snubbed them. And so it's like, yeah, we'll take him, obviously. Obviously, they're never going to go and say no to one of the best players in the world. But I think his prime window of opportunity had left, and that this is sort of like you're still the best player, so we'll take you on, and not necessarily the hype. I feel like there would be much more hype if he'd gone in 2022. But anyways, alas, given that, you would have expected that there was going to be some adaptation time to things that obviously coming to a new club. This is Mbappe's first time playing outside of France in terms of club football, having to move, do all these things, not being in an environment. Dang, I can't speak. Not being in an environment that he's, you know, used to being in Paris, or whether that be Monaco. And so things have changed, not only like in his like personal life, but also, you know, tactically. The way that PSG play and that Real Madrid play are obviously quite different. And that means with the new team means, you know, team chemistry, this, that, and the other, how we come into the team, and most specifically the cohesion that you'd have with like the front three and the midfield as well, with players like Vinicius, so on and so forth. And I think it's fair to say and I think I saw this realistically, it would have been pretty easy to see right from the get-go that the Real Madrid front three realistically speaking, they're always going to step on their toes. Already, if you take, and by front three, I'm talking about Vinny, Mbappe, and Rodrigo, which is like what most people would have assumed would have been the front three. It should have been really pretty clear to see that they were always going to step on their toes, on each other's toes to a certain degree. All those players are, like, if you want to say in their natural element, are left-sided forwards. All right. And I said left-sided forwards very specifically and for a specific reason. And the issue that you continue to see, even though Rodrigo has been sort of the one being kicked out to the right side, so he's not really able to come to the left, even though he does at times, Mbappe and Vinny very much to occupy basically the exact same spaces, which sort of leaves a vacancy in the middle. And it's the thing is, and that's why I'm going back and saying again, with reference to why I think that he should have gone in 2022. Now with the benefit of hindsight, is that now Vinny's sort of become that player, if you want. He's become, obviously with Ballon d'Or and everything, top two players in the world currently. And so there's no way that you're going to bench Vinny to put Mbappe there instead. Whereas I think if he'd gone in 2022, Vinny was obviously still, performing excellently. However, you could have still seen Mbappe, put him on and put Vinny on the bench or so on and so forth. Or Vinny sort of have to, do some more of the more dirty work. Vinny be the one who goes to the right instead of Rodrigo, something like that, and have, an Mbappe, Benzema, Vinny front three, or Vinny's on the right. But now, given the stature that Vinny's gotten, you can't go and say that, no, Vinny, you need to go play somewhere else. That left side of the Real Madrid attack is definitely a spot. No questions asked. And so it's more so Mbappe this time who has to sort of circumnavigate and be the one to, move around that. Not to mention the fact that he's the player coming in. So he's not going to go and all of a sudden, dictate things like he did perhaps at PSG, so on and so forth. And in all this happening, people have obviously been going and saying that he's just obviously not playing well. I don't think, if I had to go and sum up Mbappe's time, he's not been playing bad per se. Like, it's not, I think nobody would go and say that he's been a transfer bust thus far. He scored goals, a couple of goals. Granted, yes, a lot of them have been penalties, but he's also scored, from open play. He's not been playing terribly. Like, if Mbappe wasn't Mbappe and was, a good player that Real Madrid signed, people would be probably most likely, decently happy with the signing. If, Mbappe was like what 𝙀𝙊𝘿𝘾𝙼 was last year, people would probably be ecstatic in terms of the return that they got. But I think the fact that it's Mbappe and the expectations that there were on him and the past history with Real Madrid and everything, I think it leveled up and made it so he really had to basically start off with a bang, and basically anything below that would almost be deemed as underwhelming, if not a failure outright. But I think the biggest issue, and people have been, asking themselves, why are we seeing this Mbappe? What's happened to him, so on and so forth. Should he be playing on the left instead as a striker? Yada, yada, yada. And I'd like to say, I don't think it has anything to do. I think the position aspect does play a role to a certain degree. I think Mbappe has a preferred position, and I think that preferred position is not a striker. I don't think it's a left winger either currently. I think Mbappe is naturally, right now at least, a left forward. So not quite, sort of a hybrid between being like a full out number 9 and being a winger. He's not a touchline winger like a Dembele, like a Vinny, like a Barcola, or players like that. But he's not a striker like a Harry Kane or a Haaland either. He's sort of in between, in the middle there. But even beyond that, I don't even think it's necessarily a positional issue. I just think that, generally speaking, I just think that he's just, just in a general dip of form over the course of his career, realistically speaking. Physically, you can see him that he's not as explosive as he used to be. I remember there were, I can't remember where exactly he said it, but he was talking about in an interview or something how now as a player, knowing that you're coming into a season where at these top clubs and as a, a big international player, you're playing 40, 50 plus games a season. And so the way that you prepare your body for that is different than perhaps you would have done so before. And I think you can clearly see that just looking obviously by the fact that, like, you look at Mbappe when he just arrives at PSG, there's first couple seasons, you still, pretty skinny, pretty lean, so on and so forth. Whereas these recent years, you can see that he's, put on muscle and so on and so forth, and etc. so on and so forth. I'm not going to be one of those people who's going to go and say that he's gotten fat or anything. I just think he's put on more muscles, he's become more dense. Yeah, which I think is, perfectly fine, normal and whatnot. But I do think it's had an adverse effect in the fact that now he's not as agile, he's not as quick, he doesn't have that nearly great explosive first step as he perhaps would have had previously. And I think it's exemplified in this game. The thing is, I'm not even sure if it's just that, but there's also the fact that even when you go and you see him play, times where previously you give him Mbappe the ball or you give him in behind, he's blowing past his defender, not even giving a carry, just blowing past him with no issues. Whereas now he'll go and get the ball, slow it down, and take the defender one-on-one. And even his one-on-one ability, I'd almost say he's suffered on it. Like before, on one-on-one against Mbappe is an absolute nightmare. Not to say that he's like lost. He's not become some like fodder Landa player or anything. He's still like dangerous in a one-on-one situation, but nowhere near as dangerous as he once used to be. I think a big aspect of that is physically that he's just no longer as agile, or he's lost that agility due to the muscle mass that he's gained. But also, I think it's also just fundamental. I think he's tried to become a player that he's not. And I've mentioned this in a video, in a short thread of mine, talking about how I feel like Mbappe's declined ever since that 2022 World Cup final. And, you know, people came about and told me, oh, no, you're just salty that he's left your club, this and the other. Well, now I think it's pretty clear to see that he's just, if you compare the Mbappe now of Real Madrid, or even realistically what I've been saying, the last 2 seasons that he's been at PSG really, or really the season and a half onwards from that 2022 World Cup, he's not been that same explosive, dynamic, I will like just absolutely rip you with pace as he once used to be. Compare that to like the 2020, 2021, 2022 season, which I would say is probably statistically his best year, where he's just absolutely tearing defenses left, right, and center. You can see a pretty stark difference in the fact that there, you give him the ball, he's looking, how can I beat you? How can I put the ball in behind you and run? How can I just absolutely cook you and blitz you with my pace? And I'm not sure, I can't, corroborate this, whether this is true or not. I think there's been rumors, surrounding and circling by the fact that apparently he was a bit jealous, so to speak, of Neymar and of Messi at training and so on and so forth at PSG. And I guess the saying goes is that like seeing, Neymar and Messi, playing one-touch football, flicks, being like playmakers, being number 10, so on and so forth. And Mbappe perhaps got a bit insecure about that and sort of wanted to show at times that, hey, I can do that too. And that's where this idea of, putting his foot on the ball, coming in, putting diagonal balls, so on and so forth. And I mean, he can do it. I just don't, that's not his game at all. And that was one of the things that annoyed me the most in his, especially the last season at PSG, was this idea of him wanting to become a 10 and drop off, like get in the pocket, spray out balls. That's just not his game. Maybe in the future will be, but the thing is also like typically players go and do that. Messi's done that, and it's mostly because of the age. You're not nearly as sharp. You don't have the pace that you once used to have. So naturally, your game's going to slow down. You're going to be a lot more methodical, more efficient in your movements, so on and so forth. But Mbappe doesn't have that issue, if you want to say. Mbappe's still relatively young. He's 25. Technically, theoretically, not even in his prime yet. So he still has more than enough energy, more than enough ability to still be able to blitz defenders going in behind. So I don't get why he's wanted to turn himself into this all creating playmaking 10, which he's just never been. And yeah, I think that's affected him. Which is is it something that, has he just changed as a player ultimately? Is he no longer, like, I guess naturally, whatever we said, dang, these things is this podcast everywhere, but whatever we said is that I've always seen almost Mbappe's transition to being much more lethal and efficient in front of goal as sort of doing what Ronaldo did. Initially Ronaldo in his early career was very, direct, very direct winger, take his defender on one-on-one, put crosses in, or cut inside and shoot. Would obviously score goals and would do well there, but primarily he was taking on players one-on-one, putting in crosses. This is where like all the young Ronaldo United comps come from, so on and so forth. But you see, as he aged, so on and so forth, and I'd say like from like 2014, 2015, after that, like after his knee injury, so on and so forth, I think that's where he really became more of the modern era Ronaldo, if I may say, where he's clinical in front of goal, not dribbling nearly as much. No, you're not seeing all the fancy step overs, so on and so forth, but he's just a killer in front of net. He knows how to get to, he has an eye for the goal, and he's getting to the goal, and he's knowing where the ball's going to land, where it's going to be, and knows where best to be the position to finish the opportunity. And I think Mbappe's made that transition, or has been making that transition far earlier in his career than, for example, Ronaldo was, which, okay, is fine. And maybe then have we just I guess has he accepted the fact that he's just not going to go back and turn into that, young 18, 19-year-old Mbappe, who's, doing what he did against Argentina in that 2018 World Cup, just absolutely blitzing people with pace across the entire pitch. Like that specific action is something that I just do not see Ronaldo Mbappe doing anymore. Even just balls, getting played in behind and absolutely torching defenders. It's not happening nearly as often as it used to be. And in the context of Real Madrid, I mean, I put it in my podcast after they lost to who was it? AC Milan in the Champions League at home, that 3-1 defeat, and saying that because people obviously now with Real Madrid not doing well, there's the question of, is Ancelotti the right man for the job, so on and so forth. And to that, all I have to say is if there's one manager out there in the world that I want in terms of man management, all right, because at that point, Real Madrid, these big squads, that's the biggest concern that you have. The tactics, so on and so forth, these players are good enough. They can sort of figure things out on the pitch. They know what they need to be and where they should be and what they should be doing. But really the biggest thing is man management, being able to, maintain squad cohesion, so on and so forth. And if there's one manager in the world that you want, it's Carlo. And so my idea is if Carlo Ancelotti can't figure it out, nobody can. At that point, nobody else can. Well, maybe you argue what Zidane comes in. There's been rumors of, Xabi Alonso, so on, coming in. I don't think that Xabi Alonso, even though as good of a career as he did have and all the tactical astuteness that he may have, I don't think he would command the respect and authority that a Carlo Ancelotti has currently. And I think it's just emblematic, really, of just how the modern game is, of how I just don't think anymore you can have a front three like an MSN, an M&M, so on and so forth now in the modern game. Another massive issue with Real Madrid is, and having specifically Vini and Mbappe specifically, is that neither of them defend. I mean, how many times that I've gone and seen, for example, Jude Bellingham going, I remember that Champions League game against Lille where he gets the ball, does all the work, flicks the ball into a decent area or in an area where the two attackers should be there to at least compete for the ball, and they're just nowhere to be seen. They're on the other side of the pitch, just walking back into position, and he goes absolutely livid. I think it's just an issue of the modern game. I don't think you can have something like that where you just basically have 9 players or 8 players basically just defending the ball and have your front three sort of just do whatever they want, not defend, so on and so forth. To a certain degree, I think everything that's been happening at Madrid has almost sort of, if you want, put into perspective how difficult or put into perspective why perhaps PSG's, M&M golden era, so on and so forth, where they were spending and they had all these players, why it didn't work. It's the fact that I think it's just a feature of the modern game in which you really have to have an actual team surrounding a team cohesion, if you want, to be able to go and win at the best level in the Champions League, etc., and dominate in the league. Whereas maybe even you could argue you could have maybe one player, one superstar who walks back and doesn't defend, but having 3 of them or 2, it's too many. And this gets me on to what do I think the long term of Mbappe at Real Madrid. I don't think it's in jeopardy. I've always said and I've always maintained that I think he's going to find a way. I think eventually things are going to click sooner rather than later. I think eventually, I don't think he's going to maintain his current level. I think eventually it might take a while, but I think eventually he'll go and he'll find his feet, so on and so forth, and get back into rhythm, get back into the swing of things and begin clicking. Do I think he'll necessarily go and, put up, Ronaldo-esque numbers? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I think it's more so a matter of time, which I guess in some sense, and I've really been thinking about this, even though I've always said, I want Mbappe to do well, so on and so forth. There is a side of me, the PSG fan in me, that almost feels vindicated in the sense that despite everything that's happened with Mbappe and things that are still happening with PSG and Mbappe, which I'll get onto with the court hearings and cases, so on and so forth, there's a vindication in that with all the smack, everything that he said, PSG, the drama, so on and so forth, that I hope that maybe in this struggling patch, this purple patch of it at Real Madrid, that he may come to the realization that, hey, you know what, maybe my time at PSG, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe it wasn't all that bad, that I had it good there. I was in my hometown. I was the star of the project. Everything was sort of revolved around me. I had a good coach. I had a good team, good young team there as well. Maybe I had it actually pretty good. And maybe in this time of reflection, I think perhaps that dawns on him just a bit. But yeah. That is it. That is all. And one final thing that I'd like to go and put in is, and this is more so, I guess, a message to Real Madrid fans. supposedly rumors have come that even Mbappe's move to Real Madrid this time around specifically, apparently it was really a Perez move, in the same manner that, PSG have Nasser signings, like for example Koulibaly, whereby the coach doesn't necessarily want him, other people at the club don't necessarily want him, but the president has sort of forced the transfer through because for his own personal reasons, so on and so forth. There's rumors that Mbappe this time around coming was a Perez signing, and that there was people within the club that were like, why do we need him? Why can't we sign him? Etc. So on and so forth. These are things that have come from 𝙀𝙊𝘾𝙖𝙞𝙀𝙀. I'm not sure if you guys believe him. If you're a Madrid fan, I'd be curious to know what you guys think. What's your opinion on all of this stuff? Is it true? Do you guys agree, or is it just fake news? Or is it just fake news? Anyways, that gets me on to the second aspect of things, and that's Mbappe with the French national team, and the controversy and everything surrounding that. And I guess to recap for all those who are, I guess, not in the know, basically Mbappe for the last two international transfer windows has been basically, for lack of a better term, snubbed or has been left out of the French national team. The two occasions were slightly different. One, I would say, for Mbappe specifically, being worse than the other. The first one was his first snub was in the October transfer window, in which he was omitted because he had supposedly a thigh injury. He got injured in a previous game, and in the conference where Didier Deschamps came out and said that gave his list for players that was going to be representing France for the international window. He mentioned that Mbappe he had his thigh injury, which was heavily put into question by the French media. And the reason was that only literally, I think he came out with his press conference on the Thursday, but on the Wednesday it was the Champions League night. And this was a Champions League game between Lille and Real Madrid. And in that game, Mbappe came on in the later stages of the game and played like 15 to 20 minutes or so, which, okay, I guess you could go and argue that, all right, yes, he's still injured, but he's coming back from injury, and that, going to France to travel, so on and so forth, playing, 90 minutes, so on and so forth, at least give him some time, keep him in Madrid, let him rest up and come back to the peak of his power, so on and so forth. Okay, fair enough. No issues there. The problem, though, was that on the Sunday, so the next La Liga game, which was against Villarreal, if I'm not mistaken, he started the game and played 70 minutes of it. And so that's where the French media was like, okay, if you're injured, as you really say, why is it that you played 70 minutes after against Villarreal? If you really are coming back from an injury, you wouldn't be playing 70 minutes like 2 games afterwards. And I personally think that may have potentially caused a strain in the relationship between him and Deschamps, because I think ultimately all that really looks bad on is Didier Deschamps. Basically, it seems as though, because the thing is, Didier Deschamps also went and said that he spoke to the player. He spoke to Mbappe over the phone. He said that Mbappe was like, yeah, I'm not feeling well. And that's the reason why he wasn't going to do so. And if then afterwards, 2 days later, you're going and playing 70 out of 90 minutes in La Liga, it really is sort of undermining Deschamps' position and basically making him look like a fool. And it's clearly a deceptive move from the Mbappe clan and so on and so forth. And then there's also, rumors that came out that no, Mbappe basically actually, he went and said that because he doesn't want to play meaningless, Nations League games for France, that, France have already won the Nations League. And so winning it again wouldn't really mean much. And that he wants to, preserve himself for bigger ties. So, World Cups, finals, this and the other, to increase the chances that he could win the Ballon d'Or. Now, I'm not sure if that's true or whatnot. I'm not sure who. I'm not, claiming to go and say that, but this is the things that French media and people in France came about and were thinking. And let's just say, to put it kindly, it rubbed them the wrong way. And it almost seemed and was seemingly pretty clear that Mbappe, at least at that time, was prioritizing his time at Real Madrid over the French national team, which, okay, fine. I guess ultimately you'd argue that, he's at the end of the day, he's an employee of Real Madrid and they're the one that are paying his wages and so on and so forth. But this is Kylian Mbappe we're talking about. This is the captain of the French national team, an emblem of the French state. He's not some random, French national team player who, okay, I guess you could argue he's made a new transfer, so on and so forth. You want to give him some time to adapt. This is your captain. This is supposedly supposed to be one of the top 3, if not the best player in the world, who is basically snubbing his national team or pretending to be injured as to not go and do his international duties. So and Yeah, I think that's as a Frenchman myself, I think that's the best way you go and you see it. Even if, for example, you argue that he really was injured and really was coming back from injuries, I mean, there's no harm in him going to because he was clearly fit enough at least to play or play part and do training sessions, so on and so forth. I think he should be at least going traveling with the squad, even if that means he gets 15, 30 minutes at the end there, coming on later on or something. As a captain, I think it's just really weird. How often does it happen, unless your captain is like injured and is like out of commission, that your captain just isn't called up? Point blank period. How many times has Messi, Ronaldo not been called up, period, for the national team, despite, unless there's a serious injury where he's out for like he cannot play currently. That's the thing. And that then goes on then to the there's a little bit inside that. That's when the whole thing in Sweden happened, but I'm going to touch on that later on in the episode. But that goes on to then the second snub, which was for the November transfer window. And this time around, this was different in that this one I would say is in the sense that the first one I think looked bad and sort of bad light on Didier Deschamps. This time around, I think it just looks bad on Mbappe, point blank period, because this time around, at least according to Didier Deschamps, he once again said that he spoke with Mbappe over the phone, that Mbappe wanted to come, and that Deschamps said no, that he felt that for the best of the team, for the best of Mbappe, so on and so forth, that it's best if he doesn't come to the national team. Okay. But then he specified and reiterated in the press conference that one, that his decision to not call Mbappe up this time around had nothing to do with the investigation that he's facing with the hotel incident in Sweden. So it's not like because of his pending legal cases, so on and so forth. And it has nothing to do, and it was completely his own decision. So it's not like Mbappe said, "Oh, I don't want to come. I'm not feeling well." He specifically said that Mbappe showed it. He said he wanted to come, and that so Didier Deschamps himself basically said that he didn't want to come. And this is what he said when making this decision. He said it was made by himself, and it's better this way. It's better this way that he doesn't come. And he also then going on to say that he wouldn't discuss it any further with the media, which really did put into question, well, okay, what's the reason then? Because then he wouldn't answer questions based on that, so on and so forth. And it really, the only logical explanation I could have to that is that he didn't choose him based on sporting reasons. That he think that Mbappe's level currently is simply not good enough, or either that, or that there's been a rift between the two, and perhaps it's a disciplinary issue, that this is sort of a consequence of what basically Mbappe did to him last window for basically deceiving him and lying to him and saying that he was injured, yet then playing 70 minutes afterwards. The thing is, the fact that he didn't answer questions from the media, so on and so forth, sort of leaves things ambiguous. And ultimately now it's up to basically anybody's interpretation as to what the true reason was for not calling him up. And so, yeah, as I was saying, that if it truly was based on sporting merit, even that, it seems odd, because although Mbappe's not been doing great with Real Madrid, he's also not been like terrible either. And what it's also very odd to, once again, as I said, to not have your national team captain being called up. And if Mbappe is this sort of player who is supposed to at some point reach or be in the conversations to be talked about in the calibers of Messi, Ronaldo, etc., so on and so forth, how often were they not called up for the national team? How often when they were fit, they're doing well, and they haven't announced their international retirement like Messi did a couple years ago? How often did it happen that happened and they were not called up? And not to mention, not only that, but even with Deschamps has always been a manager, a national team manager, who's always tried to give his players confidence. And even oftentimes, when his players haven't been doing well at their club level, he's always called them for the national team. And prime examples for me are Griezmann, who, when he was going through his rough patch at Barcelona, was still getting called for the national team. Giroud, when he was barely getting any game minutes at Chelsea or wherever it might have been, was still getting called to the national team. And more recently, 𝙀𝙊𝘾𝘼, who, as a PSG fan, I could say has very, very much underperformed and underperformed and hasn't been at the expectations that you would have for a PSG player, let alone for the French national team player, and he's still getting called up. He's a player who, I guess, almost, if you want to say, says that the national team, it's almost a safe haven. It's a time to reset, come back into a familiar environment, see friends, and sort of regain some form to a certain extent. And the fact that, okay, if he's done this for other players who I would argue when they weren't performing well with their clubs is worse than what Mbappe is currently feeling right now at Real Madrid, yet they were called and Mbappe's not. And so that leads me almost to believe that the reason that he didn't call him was disciplinary and sort of a reaction to, oh, so you want to lie to me, you want to go and say you're injured, snub me, make me look like a fool. Well, then I'll show you. I'm the boss here. I'm not going to pick you. And I think it's sort of maybe in a way of him going and reasserting his authority. And then now even further on, now that this November international window has gone by, not only did France, actually do, quite well, finishing at the end top of the group in the Nations League, so on and so forth. But then also given the fact that there's been all the issues with the national team, there's been Griezmann, seemingly retiring from international football relatively early, given on everything that's going on, and there's been clearly a rift between him and Deschamps and Griezmann, and the fact that even in that September international window when Mbappe was there, that 𝙋𝙊𝘾𝙖𝙆 supposedly was not happy with Mbappe's performances and called him basically a princess, and how there's many people within the French national team squad, supposedly again, allegedly, that are not happy with the treatment, the preferential treatment that Mbappe's been getting over other people in the squad, and it's left a massive mark on there, and he's clearly causing some tension within that French national team dressing room. And I think Deschamps basically leaving him out is sort of reasserting a bit his authority and reasserting his state for, I'm the main man, you guys are following my directions, it's not Mbappe, so on and so forth. That's the only really explanation that I can give to why he did not choose him. And then now rumors are coming out that potentially when Mbappe does come back, because I do think he will come back, there could be conversations as to whether he may be stripped of the captaincy or not. And again, these are all just rumors, so on and so forth, so I can't, say without like absolutely beyond a shadow of doubt that this is, how things are going to be. But if that is the case, or if it's anything somewhere close to the case, that Mbappe could be stripped of the captaincy, I think it really does put into perspective how dire things have gotten between him and the national team. But yeah, that's the national team. It'd be interesting to see, how things progress from there. I think, if Mbappe were to be stripped of the captaincy, I think I don't even want to think about what that would do for mentally. I think even right now you can see that people are saying that Mbappe is like depressed. He's not doing well. Even going back to that first international window when he was injured and whatnot, and we'll go on to it soonly. When he went to Sweden, a lot of people would criticize him. Ultimately, I'm always one to go and say that, he was free. You're a player, you're an adult. You should be able and allowed to do, whatever you want to do, be able to go do all these things at your own leisure. There's no issues there. However, it also doesn't look well when your national team and you're the captain of this national team is playing, and at the same time you are photoed in, Sweden at a hotel having the time of your life. It doesn't bode well compared to like his Real Madrid teammates, Carvajal, who's gotten like properly injured, is going and still attending the Spanish national team games without any obligations, obviously not having the same stature as Mbappe does. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. I'll keep you guys posted on any developments on the whole national team situation, although there's not going to be quite a long hiatus on that, given that the next international window is going to be in March. So if he gets snubbed for that, I think then really we can, put some calls for him, unless he's like genuinely injured. But yeah, that gets me on then to this whole Stockholm hotel incident, so on and so forth. And okay, before I get on into this and anything, I guess as I said earlier on in the episode, this is viewer discretion is advised. Some of the topics that are going to be discussed here are going to be, I'm not gonna go and use explicit language, so on and so forth. I'll try to keep it YouTube friendly, YouTube advertiser friendly. But again, some pretty heavy topics are going to be discussed here, and I'm assuming that most of you probably have an idea of what's going on and the allegations made against Mbappe, so on and so forth. And what I'll say is that once again, I'm a very big proponent in the presumption of innocence. Regardless of what happens, regardless of the person, at the end of the day, Mbappe currently he's presumed innocent until proven guilty. So whatever the allegations are, this doesn't mean he's done it. This doesn't mean he hasn't done it. Everything is still pending. I'm always want to say, let the courts do what they do. And then once there's a verdict or a conclusion to this, then you can come and give your verdict. And so everything that's going to happen on with Mbappe, regardless of my thoughts on him personally, the player, the person, so on and so forth, I'm just going to say you've got the presumption of innocence. I'm not going to go and give final cases and verdicts on my case. But basically to let's give an overview, a very sped up overview of what happens. And the allegation is that Mbappe was alleged of initially so Mbappe during that October transfer window went to Sweden with his friends 𝙀𝙖𝙖𝙾𝙖𝙖𝙀𝙀, who is now at Leverkusen, if not mistaken, on loan. Went there with a couple of friends to enjoy the night out. And in the aftermath of that, a couple of days later, there was an investigation in the hotel of a woman coming and basically going and saying that accusing somebody in the hotel or whatnot that of a potential 𝙎𝙊𝘾𝙖𝙖𝙀 incident. And one of the, if I'm not mistaken, one of the Swedish tabloid papers basically said that Mbappe was somewhat tangentially involved in that case. At first, I remember afterwards, the Mbappe's lawyers in France said that they had nothing to do about it. They weren't informed. They weren't contacted by anyone within the sphere at binding, but like the judicial system in Sweden, saying that Mbappe is a person of interest. And it was just the fact that Mbappe was in the hotel during the time of this incident, but there wasn't a specific complaint against him specifically. That was the initial thing that was being lobbied, and so on and so forth. And so the lawyer said that Mbappe, it wouldn't be possible for such an incident to happen because Mbappe is always alone. He's always got bodyguards around him. So something like that couldn't happen whatsoever. And he was fervently, denying and claiming his innocence, that there's been none of the, basically all the allegations against him were false and that he had nothing to do with it. And obviously with everything, all that, and the nature of the accusation against him, it's a pretty heavy accusation. It's nothing to be taken seriously or to be taken lightly, pardon me. And it certainly did not paint Mbappe in the best of lights, especially given everything that's had been happening with the national team already. There was the whole tangential. I think there was an Adidas ad that they made for one of the Madrid jerseys, so on and so forth, and which Bellingham posted a picture of it, and Mbappe was in the picture. But then when Adidas posted the picture, Mbappe wasn't there. Some people argued that the reason that Mbappe wasn't there in the Adidas one is because, Nike, Mbappe is a Nike athlete, so on and so forth. But the thing is, though, if that was the case, why was Mbappe in that photo shoot to begin with? They would have known that Mbappe was a Nike athlete long before, and 𝙀𝙬𝘾𝙖𝙖𝙀𝙀 was also in that ad as well, and he's also a Nike athlete. So then there's rumors that maybe Adidas took him out and edited him out because of the accusations and allegations made against him, so on and so forth. There's all that, and basically at that point, that was all the news that at least that there was at the time. Mbappe was just basically fervently denying these cases and allegations. The thing is, more recently, there's been cases that apparently actually Mbappe's has actually new information has come out, and according to Le Parisien, I've got all the sources, all the links and details to everything I've been using when doing this research. And apparently, the Mbappe is now admitting to having a relation, but that he's saying that it was consensual, and that's all that happened, and that there had been exchanges with the girl or whatnot that this interaction happened with, and that they were exchanging, and that, I guess according to him, it was completely consensual. So we went from initially saying that none of this happened, that he couldn't have met him, seemingly from what I understood of it, that now it was consensual. The issue sort of still is that there's still currently no idea. It could have been that Mbappe they actually have a consensual relationship, but that this 𝙎𝙊𝘾 case has nothing to do with them. There's a bunch of things that there's basically a lot of lack of information. And again, what I said previously when I was, alluding to the nature of everything that's going on, is that, again, Mbappe is presumed innocent. I have no idea what's going on. I'm not going to go and say that, Mbappe can never do this. I don't know Mbappe personally. I don't know what he does in his personal life, so on and so forth. But what I will say, and what I will give him the courtesies as I do to everybody, Mbappe, you're innocent until proven guilty, unless there's a court case or a verdict come against him. I'm going to go and say that he's nothing wrong. And I apply the same rule, whether it's Mbappe players, him, Mendy, or clubs like Man City and the 115 charges. Again, I'm consistent in my worldview. I'm saying that you are innocent until proven guilty, unless there is a legal verdict on the decision saying that you are guilty of this crime or whatnot. I'm going to say this as innocent, but once again, I'll keep you guys posted on this as well. And the thing is, though, that's not even the least of Mbappe's legal issues, because the thing is, though, now coming back, there's also still, is still having legal issues with PSG and bonuses. So basically, as I said previously, you guys knew that Mbappe left this transfer and went to Real Madrid as a free agent. The thing is, though, is that last year when he was still at PSG in that preseason, Mbappe didn't partake in any of the preseason tours or anything, because basically the PSG wanted to sell him and we're saying like, well, if you're not going to go, you're going to leave as a free agent. We're not going to make any money on you. You're the best player in the world. You always said that, you know, you were never going to leave for free, so on and so forth, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Basically, at the end of the day, Mbappe reintegrated the squad, started playing games again. And what was said apparently was that there was sort of a verbal agreement that Mbappe would relinquish some of his bonuses and give that, like, basically not get paid for that, as a matter as to sort of, if you want, act as sort of a transfer fee for Mbappe, so to speak. And this amount was in the order of, like, I think 55 million in bonuses that apparently they'd allegedly, you know, agreed to not pay. Now, the thing is, though, is that now, after everything's happened and so on and so forth, now Mbappe is basically suing PSG for owing him 55 million in wages, and that apparently Mbappe went basically unpaid for wages for the final 3 months at PSG, so from April to June. Now, as I said, PSG basically believed that they basically had a gentleman's agreement based on this thing, that he would leave this amount of money, as I said again, a pseudo transfer fee. But the thing is, though, under French law, for something under French labor law, for something like that to happen, like gentleman's agreement, or like, they mean absolutely nothing. For something like that to have happened, they would have had to sign it, send it to the league, and have it basically made official. And as like douchey as it may sound, on this one, I'm actually pretty clear. I think, even though I'd say that morally, I think it's wrong to go and say that, yeah, I'm going to leave up my bonuses, so on and so forth. But ultimately, legally speaking, PSG are not within the right to basically withhold money to Mbappe. You could say it's a scummy move. You could say that it's, you know, a dick move from Mbappe and his clan and everything. But at the end of the day, it wasn't written on paper. PSG sort of alluded to the fact, and I think perhaps he actually did say that gentleman's agreement, funny enough, because the thing is, though, back in January after the 𝙀𝙀 Champions, the final, Mbappe basically came to French television. People weren't expecting him to come, and basically came and said that if he were to leave, that things have been made in place such that the club won't basically suffer financially, because that was basically the biggest concern for PSG, was that him leaving, basically with the wages and not getting that transfer money, would basically put PSG in financial turmoil. And that apparently he had discussions with, you know, people at the club, Nasser, etc., so on and so forth, and that everything was going to be squared off and there wouldn't be an issue, basically alluding to this gentleman's agreement, which PSG then said that in this meeting that happened, there was Mbappe was there, the president was there, Luis Enrique was there, as well as Luis Campos, so as witnesses to all of this. The thing, once again, though, is that under French labor law, that doesn't mean anything unless it's signed, dotted, and everything sent over. All that is null and void. So there's also that legal dispute. Most likely, I would assume that PSG is going to have to pay up. And honestly, I just think that overall for PSG, I don't think it looks good. Maybe they thought that they had a case in this. I just think that just pay them. PSG, we're a rich club. It's 55 million, even though it's a significant amount of money, but it's just not worth it. I think the thing is, though, after all these allegations, then everything was happening, Mbappe then threw shade basically to PSG, saying that because this whole thing that was happening with him in Sweden and everything was a day before or a couple of days before his hearing with the basically the French footballing body, the governing body for wages and everything, and basically threw shade at PSG, saying that all these things are happening right before my hearing. But yeah, that's basically been an update on everything that's been going on with Mbappe. I think eventually, even though I think this is probably the worst time in his career in terms of downturn, but I do think eventually he'll find his feet. Things will start going, you know, in his favor again, and he'll find a way to bounce back for the better. But I'd be curious to know what you guys think. What do you guys think on Mbappe's situation this time at Madrid, the French national team, him being snubbed, the court allegations, both with PSG, the Stockholm one? What do you guys think? Do you guys think he's been a bust thus far? Do you think it's just a matter of giving him time? yeah, and with that, cheers. Thanks for coming to the episode. I want to try to do this a lot more often. Let me know where you guys are listening from, whether that be Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, whatever podcasting platform you choose. And let me also know if you guys are more interested in, if you guys enjoy these longer form podcast episodes where I just basically yap for, an hour and so. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys soon. And with that, remember, stay safe, stay kind, and stay blessed. And see you guys soon. Bye. Godspeed.